Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all. Welcome back to our Your Muslim Neighbors once again, and we are now in the final episode dealing with the chapter of the heights. And in this chapter, which is it is the major portion of this chapter is actually the narrative of Moses. The longest narrations. We mentioned the narration of Moses and his story and the events, of his life and the major events with him, Pharaoh, the children of Israel, etc., are mentioned in the Quran more than any other prophet or in any other narrative, because there's so much to be learned, and because the similarity of the followers of Muhammad is very similar to the children of Israel. They were, the chosen people of their time, chosen with prophets and chosen with the divine message, and chosen basically to live the life of Islam, live the life of submission and religion, and demonstrate it to mankind. And after a very long period of back and forth, ups and downs, and ultimately culminating with the sending of Jesus and their rebellion against him for the most part, ultimately that choice was handed over now to the followers of the Prophet Muhammad, and that legacy continues. And many of the Jewish community have also accepted Islam, as many of the Christians have also accepted. But this is, in fact, the continuation. Nevertheless, in any rate, here we have the longest, and it would be wonderful if we could go through the entirety of this narration, but of course it's going to be very long. So we want to single out certain incidents. And here, the incident of Moses with the confrontation of the magicians is something, just amazing, and something we really need to reflect on. So before we get to that, we want to start at the beginning of the narrative and see how that builds up. Where does that scenario, that scene, from where does it come? What's the buildup? And so we'll begin with the beginning of that narrative, and we'll read some of the Arabic, and then we'll translate and elucidate, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ثم بعثنا من بعدهم موسى بآياتنا إلى فرعون وملئه فظلموا بها فانظر كيف كان عاقبة المفسدين قال موسى يا فرعون إني رسول من رب العالمين حقيق على أن لا أقول على الله إلا الحق قد جئتكم ببينة من ربكم فأرسل معي بني إسرائيل. So this is the beginning of the return of Moses back to Egypt after being granted prophethood and being addressed from the fire from God himself, telling him that he must go back and addressed Pharaoh, the very Pharaoh that he's fleeing from, that he had fled from years ago. Now he's ordered to go back to him and invite him to Islam, invite him to surrender to God, and deliver the children of Israel back to their original land of Palestine. And so here Allah mentions, and then thereafter, after mentioning many prophets previously in this very same chapter, finally the narrative is now with Moses, and then God mentions that after those prophets, the prophet Moses was sent with his signs, with God's signs, to Pharaoh and his Mala'ihi and his close circle and those who followed him. So now Moses has reached, and he has reached back to Egypt, and now he goes right to the court of Pharaoh and addresses him and begins to call him towards God. And he says, "Oh Pharaoh, Ya Fir'aun," and Pharaoh in Arabic is Fir'aun, by the way. "Verily, I am the messenger from the Lord of the worlds." And it's significant that he didn't just say that I'm God's messenger. He said, I am the messenger of the Lord of the worlds. And Pharaoh had claimed that he's the Lord. I'm the Lord Most High. And so the first opening statement is that I am the messenger of the actual Lord of the worlds, which obviously you have nothing to do with. The Lord of all the creations. I'm that messenger of that Lord. Haqiqun ala an la aqula ala Allah. It's only befitting for me to say nothing other than what, is truth. And therefore, I'm inviting you to truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. قَدْ جِئْتُكُمْ بِبَيِّنَةٍ, and I have come with clear signs from my Lord. So send with me the children of Israel. And of course, he had enslaved the children of Israel and subjected them, to slavery and all of the most, humiliating and difficult tasks, were set upon them. Basically, torment and torture. So if you have some ayat, you have something to show it. What do you have? So Musa alayhi salam cast his staff, and similar to the biblical narration, the staff turned into a serpent, a live serpent, moving about on the earth. Mubin, and it's a clear serpent. And they took his hand out from under his armpit, and this tremendous radiant light was shining, like the light of the sun, had it been there in Pharaoh's court. So at this juncture, the close circle, the advisors of Pharaoh, who were sitting up in that sitting, so they exclaimed, "Inna hadha lasahirun alim." This is no doubt a very well-versed magician, and it's noteworthy here that, as our scholars say, that every prophet was sent to his people with a type of miracle in that which they themselves had become experts in. And so they say that during the time of Moses, during the time of Pharaoh, so magic had really gone to its pinnacle. I mean, magicians were really, really, skilled, and they had mastered their craft, and they had taken their craft to heights perhaps that unseen previously, and maybe unseen thereafter. And Egyptian civilization is quite amazing, and there's a lot of things that, to this day, that they're having trouble trying to explain. One is the pyramids. How did they build those? They're still having a problem with that. And in any case, so it's evident that they were very, very, adept in magic. And they also say that Pharaoh, to keep his people in utter, awe, of Pharaoh, he applied, or he deputed these magicians to show all of this, apparently supernatural stuff to keep people in awe. And they were, dedicated to Pharaoh, kind of this PR squad, if you will, to keep the people in awe, that this fellow has supernatural powers. And actually, the magic that they were involved in is not, there's two types of magic, actually, that in our tradition. One type of magic is the sleight of hand, the Houdini kind of magic. It's just trickery of the hand and trickery of the eye. And then you have another type of magic, which is known as black magic, which is also, we probably have heard that. And the witches and all of that. So actually, what that involves is that is involvement with the jinn. We talked about Satan being from the jinn, and so that there's the reality to that, and that's really serious stuff, and is very dangerous as well. And in all religious traditions, there's always some sort of therapies that have been prescribed, for this type of applications. Satan teaches these type of applications to his friends, and they create a lot of mischief with that. So we also believe in that, and that's true. That's reality. That's not our discussion here. In any case, these magicians were not of that type. These magicians were the Houdini sleight of hand type. And so these, the courtiers of Pharaoh, they thought, well, he's just really good at that. So he's also a Houdini type. And he's just very good at this sleight of hand. And that's his magic. And so, no problem. We'll dispense with him forthwith. Just send out, to all of your magicians, we're spread out over the country, doing your PR work, casting awe into the people. So call them and have them assemble here, and we'll have a challenge. We'll do away with this fellow, in no time. And they said, you see, this is a fellow that just wants to take supremacy. And this is what happens, whenever the prophets used to come to the people of the world and had worldly supremacy, they always thought that they were being challenged, that the prophets want to take their world. They want to take their, their country. They want their authority. They want their power. They want their wealth. They don't want any of that. Accept Islam, keep your kingdom, keep your wealth, keep everything as it is. And this was the tradition that after Muhammad, peace be upon him, that was his tradition. That was the tradition in early Islam. The kingdom, we were not after kingdoms. We were after, the kingdom of God in the hereafter. We want people to accept that. Keep your kingdom, just accept Islam. Keep your authority. Just accept Islam and rule according to the rules that God has sent. That's all. That's all we want from you. We don't want what you have. We want what God has. So, however, but people with that kind of disease in their heart, they think everybody's trying to take what they have. So they thought that, yeah, this Moses, he wants to take over from Pharaoh. He wants to take over the kingdom here. So just call the magicians and we'll do away with them forthwith. So then the magicians were called and they actually come. وَجَاءَ السَّحَرَةُ فِرْعَوْنَ قَالُوا إِنَّ لَنَا لَأَجْرًا إِن كُنَّا نَحْنُ الْغَالِبِينَ. So the magicians came, and being people who were doing a worldly occupation for worldly benefits, they said, okay, so if we compete with Moses and we overpower him, then obviously we're going to get a good reward for that, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And you will be made among the very close ones as well. So they were inspired and they were motivated, to put on their best act, and they would be rewarded, handsomely for that. Okay, fine. So they said, okay, Moses, so either you begin, you throw your staff or whatever it is that you have, or we'll throw our things, or we'll display our tricks, if you will. So Moses gave the reply, you can, you begin by throwing your staffs and sticks. And so since Moses, it was known that Moses had this trick of turning a staff into a stick, so they also brought sticks and ropes. And they said, oh, he can make serpents? Well, we'll make serpents as well. So they threw their sticks and their ropes, and they all started to appear as though they were, as they were serpents as well. Right? And, and we can just imagine, this setting here. Moses, is by himself, alone. Of course, God is with him, and that's more than sufficient. But apparently, he's there alone. And you have these magicians, and, God only knows how many they might have been. They might have been in the hundreds or thousands of them. So all of these fellows have thrown their sticks and their staffs, and you've got thousands of huge, apparently serpents, winding about and moving about on the earth. And now Moses, is observing all of this, right? What's going to be the outcome? And he knows that, of course, God is with him. He also knows that his staff is also capable of turning into a serpent. And but in any case, in another narration of the same story, فَأَوْجَسَ فِي نَفْسِهِ خِيفَةً مُوسَى. So now at this juncture, Moses is getting a little bit, sort of apprehensive, knowing that God is with him and all that, but just suppose, that my stick is not capable of dealing with all of these sticks, thousands of them, serpents, I have only one. Then I'm not afraid of myself. Perhaps he was thinking that what if the people, and actually it was Moses who actually suggested that bring all of those, bring all of your magicians on the day of celebration, the day of Eid, or the holy day of celebrations, where everybody. And the idea is that when Moses presents his signs, and the magicians, who challenge and bring their magic, when the signs of God overpower, then it's going to be manifest that Pharaoh is not God. He is not the Lord. That the one who has sent Moses is the God. So it was an exercise in invitation. So the whole idea is not simply to defeat Pharaoh and the magicians, but rather to be a demonstration that would, bring about the acceptance of Islam for the entirety of all those who were observing, whoever God gave tawfiq. Now, however, now we have a scenario where we have these thousands of serpents, slithering about, and so Moses is somewhat, apprehensive. What's going to be the outcome? In this juncture, God sends, the order. And then the order was given from God to Moses, throw your staff. You will be the one who will be uppermost. Your display will conquer all displays that are there in front of you. Don't worry, And so Musa threw his staff, and after throwing the staff, that staff of Musa gobbled up and just sort of, did away with all of those sticks and all of those staffs that had turned into serpents. Moses' serpent gobbled up and swallowed all of those serpents. And now what's going to take place, we'll see after a very short break, inshallah. Stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we're continuing with the narrative of Moses and the magicians, and the fact that when Moses came to claim his prophethood and claim his messengership from God, showing the signs, and the sign of the staff and the sign of his hand, the staff turning into the serpent and his hand turning into that brilliant light. And Pharaoh, thinking this is nothing but pure magic, which he was adept at, and he had his magicians stationed all over the country. They were brought, they were assembled, and a competition takes place. Thousands of them, perhaps, who knows how many they were. They threw their things, and as God says, وَجَاءُوا بِسِحْرٍ عَظِيمٍ, and they presented by any measure a huge and a magnanimous display of magic. As we mentioned, they were probably more adept at that than humanity ever had been, or perhaps ever would be. And so it must have been a very overwhelming display of magic that they gave. However, God gave the order to Moses, simply throw your staff. Don't worry, it's going to be done. And that single staff of Musa turned into a huge serpent, which gobbled up and swallowed all of those serpents and all of those sticks and all of those ropes, which had the optical illusion that they were actually serpents that were writhing about and moving about on the face of the earth. So now, the magicians, and nobody knows the reality of magic better than a magician, right? So these magicians observing this, that their thousands of staffs and sticks have been decimated and gobbled up by the serpent of Moses, they realized that serpent is not like ours. Ours was simply optical illusions. After all, they were just made to appear as though they were serpents. They didn't really transform. And actually, even while they appeared, they were merely still sticks and ropes, nothing more than that. However, Moses, that was a real serpent. That was a real being that gobbled up and swallowed and decimated everything that we had. And seeing that, they were so overpowered and overwhelmed by that sign, even though Pharaoh couldn't understand. Right? He didn't want to understand. His heart blackened with arrogance and pride would not allow him to understand. But these magicians, in one moment, their hearts were turned and their eyes being opened and their minds working and cognitively, realizing the situation here. They all exclaimed, "Amanna bi Rabbil Alamin." And so the whole, the whole objective for which Moses, had everyone, attend and gather on this occasion. So the first to accept were the magicians themselves, and they exclaimed that we believe in the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of Moses and Harun, and they also mentioned that we believe in the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of Moses and the Lord of Harun, inferring obviously that not Pharaoh, who claims to be the Lord, the Lord of Moses and Harun, who, as Moses described, the one who has created the heavens and the earth and all that is therein, changes the day from the night, and the generations that exist now and the generations who came before. In another narration, it's mentioned in Surah Al-Ghafir, that Moses continues to invite Pharaoh, when he asks, who is your Lord? I'm not your Lord. Who is your Lord? My Lord is the one who gives all things its creation and gives it its nature and then guides it to what is beneficial for it. Do you do anything like that? And among the things that he mentioned was the creator of all of us and our fathers and our forefathers. And obviously you were born. And so if you're the Lord, then who is the Lord of your father and your grandfathers and the generations who came before that? So, and then ultimately, when when, of course, Pharaoh had no answer, and this is what they usually do. Tyrants will initially they will cover up any kind of claim, and so that it doesn't kind of leak out. Nobody should be aware of it. If that doesn't work, then refute it and make fun of it and mock it, so that it also should be mocked by the people. If that doesn't work, then what they'll try to do generally is they'll try and buy you out, bribes, hush money. There's an issue now here in the States, hush money among our political leaders. So they try that, but of course, prophets are not going to accept hush money, right? And so the last result is result to force, force, torture, and if necessary, execution. So now these magicians, they have now realized that Pharaoh has no power, and that the Lord of Moses and Harun, who has the creator of the universe, he's the one that has all the power. And so they exclaim in front of everyone, we believe in the Lord of Moses and Harun. Not only that, they all fell into prostration. And they all went into prostration. And this is amazing, that in the twinkle of an eye, in a moment, these people were, the criminals who were the cronies of Pharaoh, and totally under his domination. And seeing this one sign, and this within momentarily, they were transformed into true believers, who are ultimately going to become martyrs. Allahu Akbar. God is great. Now, Pharaoh is standing by watching this whole scenario. He and his deputies and his whole cabinet and the whole community is now looking at this and watching, and now he's really in hot water, And so now what does he have to resort to? He has only, as I mentioned, he has now only to resort to force. And he exclaims, "Amantum lahu qabla an adhana lakum?" You believed in Moses before I give you permission. I'm in charge here. Nobody's going to believe in anything until I give the permission, And so he became furious, and he said, as a result of that, as a result of that, what I'll do, I'm going to crucify you. Not simply crucify you. First of all, I'm going to cut off your hands and your feet. And then I'm going to crucify you and nail you to the cross and let you die a slow death. And so what was their reply? This is the one of the most amazing aspects of the whole story, is that these individuals who were now previous, just moments before, they were the paid patrons of Pharaoh. Now, within a moment, they become the totally submissive and totally, committed followers of Moses, ready to give their lives, So if we say that, that religion, it's difficulty, there's prohibitions, you have to pray, and you have to fast, you have to spend, some of your money and pay zakat and so forth and so on. You can't eat this, you can't drink that. There's difficulties that are uncomfortable, perhaps we perceive. Come on, these are all for our betterment, by the way. It's for our goodness, for our betterment, But if you see, and that's one of the prayers that we've been taught, to ask God, do not put a burden on us like the burden of those who came previously that we cannot bear. Imagine we've been placed in that situation where either you leave your religion or we're cutting your hands and feet off and we're going to crucify you on the cross and let you die a slow, painful, terrible death. What would we do? What would our position be? Well, the position of these magicians was, they said, La dhir, no problem. No issue. Inna ila rabbina munqalibun. We are going to return back to our Creator. And our hope is, in other narrations, narrations of this story, they further elucidate, we have hope that our Creator is going to forgive our sins, and that He's going to, accept us, that we have the first ones to accept this message. The whole exercise from the perspective of Pharaoh was to defeat Moses and his magic and bring everybody and more solidify and consolidate his position, and everybody following his religion and accepting his lordship. Now the tables have totally turned. And the whole spectacle is now focused on the truth of Moses and what he's brought as a message. So the magicians say, we have hope that we'll be the first to accept this message. Even if Pharaoh is not accepting it and the nobles are not accepting it, and they didn't, and they don't until they're utterly destroyed later on. But we will accept this message, even if it means giving our lives, and not only giving our lives, but in the most treacherous and the most painful and most severe of ways. And secondly, they say, and we have hope that Allah will excuse our sins. And for this magic and this pomp and show and this PR that we used to have to do to promote Pharaoh and his skewed, concepts and belief, because we were at the forefront promoting these things. We were involved in supporting him and promoting him, and helping him along with this blasphemy. And so we have hope that this sacrifice of ours is going to expiate and be an atonement, for that crime in front of Allah. And it was carried out, the sentence was carried out, and they were crucified and they were killed. And obviously they were martyred, and now they are enjoying, from that time up until now and until forever, that moment of torture and those few moments of excruciating pain, the recompense that they are enjoying now and forever, they would have forgotten that totally. So may we take the lesson that following religion is not that difficult, but it can be. There will be trials and tribulations, and the promise of God is that they will not be more severe than what we can bear. So whatever trials and tribulations, we ask God to make them easy and give us the ability to bear them. And until our next chapter, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.